Imagine a soldier who survived being shot in the face, lost an eye, had his hand blown off, and still kept fighting. A man so fearless that he once ripped off his own fingers when a doctor refused to amputate them. This is not a Hollywood action hero. This is a real person. His name? Adrian Carton de Wiart. This is the story of the real-life Terminator, a man who fought in 4 wars, was wounded dozens of times, escaped from a prison camp, and kept going no matter what. If you love incredible war stories, stick around, because this one will blow your mind. Before we continue, make sure to subscribe to this channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss a story about history's greatest warriors. Adrian Carton de Wiart was born in 1880 into an aristocratic family. He lived in Egypt, studied at Oxford, but gave up his comfortable life to become a soldier. He fought in the Boer War, World War I, World War II, and even helped Poland during the Polish-Soviet War. But what made him different? No matter how many times he was shot, bombed, or captured, he never gave up. In this video, we will follow his incredible journey from the battlefields of Africa to secret missions in China. Let's dive into the story of the world's toughest soldier. Adrian Carton de Wiart was born on May 5, 1880, in Brussels, Belgium, into a wealthy aristocratic family. His father was a Belgian businessman, and his mother was Irish. Even though he was born in Belgium, he spent much of his childhood in Cairo, Egypt, where he learned French and Arabic. As a young boy, Adrian was full of energy and adventure. He later moved to England, where he attended Oxford University. However, sitting in a classroom was not for him. When the Second Boer War broke out in 1899, he didn't think twice. He quit school and joined the British Army. There was just one problem. Adrian was only 19 years old, and his father did not approve of him going to war. So what did he do? He faked his age and enlisted under a false name, pretending to be 25 years old. In South Africa, he got his first taste of battle and his first wounds. He was shot in the stomach and the groin, leaving him seriously injured. The army sent him back to England to recover. His father was furious when he found out what Adrian had done. But despite the injuries, Adrian had no regrets. He knew one thing for sure. He was born to be a soldier. After recovering, Adrian returned briefly to Oxford, but his heart was still with the army. He soon officially joined the British military and became an officer in the 4th Royal Irish Dragoon Guards. This was the start of his long and dangerous military career. He served in India and South Africa, where he became known for being fearless and tough. He loved adventure, sports, and anything that tested his strength. By 1907, he had officially become a British citizen, and a year later, he married an Austrian countess, Friederike Fugger von Babenhausen. By the time World War I began in 1914, Adrian had already been in the army for 14 years, but his greatest battles were still ahead, and the war would turn him into a legend. When World War I began in 1914, Adrian Carton de Wiart was already an experienced soldier. He was sent to British Somaliland in East Africa, where Britain was fighting against a local rebel leader, Mohammed bin Abdullah, known as the Mad Mullah. During a battle in November 1914, Adrian led an attack on an enemy fort, but as he charged forward, he was shot twice in the face. One bullet hit his eye, and another struck his ear. Despite the pain, he kept fighting until he collapsed. Doctors were able to save his life, but his left eye and part of his ear were gone forever. Instead of retiring from the army, Adrian did something incredible. He went straight back to war. Now with a black eye patch, he looked even more like a warrior. The Western Front, endless injuries. In 1915, Adrian was sent to France to fight on the Western Front, where the war was at its deadliest. He quickly became famous among his men for his insane bravery. He would run through enemy fire, lead attacks from the front, and never back down. But war in the trenches was brutal, and Adrian paid the price. Over the next few years, he was shot multiple times. Head, hip, leg, ankle, ear, again. Most men would have given up after so many injuries, but not Adrian. Each time he was wounded, he refused to stay in the hospital for long. He wanted to return to the battlefield as soon as possible. One of the most legendary moments of Adrian's life happened in 1915. During battle, his hand was badly wounded. His fingers were hanging off, and the doctors wanted to wait before removing them. Adrian had no patience for that. He ripped off his own fingers and told the doctor to get on with it. After that injury, his left hand had to be amputated. But did that stop him from fighting? Number, he just learned to shoot with one hand and kept leading his men. The Battle of the Somme. In July 1916, Adrian took part in one of the deadliest battles of World War I, the Battle of the Somme. He was commanding the 8th Battalion, Gloucestershire Regiment, and was leading his men into combat. The battle was hell on earth. Thousands of men were dying around him, and many officers had already been killed. When 3 battalion commanders fell, Adrian took control of their units too. Under heavy enemy fire, he stood in the trenches, shouting orders and encouraging his men. Even when bullets and bombs rained down, he never ducked for cover. He kept fighting until the enemy was pushed back. For his incredible bravery, Adrian was awarded the Victoria Cross, the highest honor in the British Army. The award described his actions as outstanding courage, calmness, and determination. By the end of World War I, Adrian had been shot multiple times, lost an eye, lost a hand, and suffered countless injuries. But he never stopped fighting. His soldiers saw him as unstoppable, a leader who would go anywhere and face any danger. In his memoirs, Adrian later wrote, "Frankly, I enjoyed the war. That one sentence tells you everything you need to know about him. While others feared battle, Adrian thrived in it. But his military career was far from over. In the next chapter, he would take part in another brutal war, the Polish-Soviet War. After World War I, Adrian Carton de Wiart didn't retire like many other soldiers. Instead, he was sent on a new mission, this time to Poland. The country had just regained independence, but was immediately thrown into war against Soviet Russia. Britain sent a military mission to help, and Adrian was chosen to be part of it. A new battlefield, the Polish-Soviet War, 1919 to 1921. At first, Adrian was supposed to be an advisor, but that wasn't his style. Instead of staying behind the scenes, he went straight to the front lines. He wanted to see the war up close. He often inspected battlefields himself, even when it was extremely dangerous. One day, his armored train was ambushed by Bolshevik cavalry. Most people would have taken cover. But Adrian? He climbed onto the train and started shooting back. At one point, he fell off the train, but instead of running, he got back on and kept fighting. His bravery made him respected among Polish officers, and he was awarded the Virtuti Militari, Poland's highest military honor. A quiet life in Poland? Not exactly. When the war ended in 1921, Adrian decided to stay in Poland instead of returning to Britain. He bought land in the Pripyat marshes, now in Belarus, and spent his time hunting, fishing, and enjoying the wilderness. For the next 15 years, he lived the life of a landowner, but he never lost his military mindset. He stayed in touch with Polish military leaders and closely watched the rising tensions in Europe. By 1939, World War II was about to begin, and Adrian's peaceful life was over. The British government called him back into service, and he was sent to Poland once again, but this time as the head of Britain's military mission. When Germany invaded Poland in September 1939, Adrian was right in the middle of it. He barely escaped the Nazi advance, making a dangerous journey across Romania before finally reaching Britain. Now almost 60 years old, most people would have retired, but not Adrian. His most incredible war stories were still ahead of him. By 1939, Adrian Carton de Wiart was nearly 60 years old and had already survived 3 major wars. He had lost an eye, a hand, part of an ear, and had been shot multiple times. But when World War II broke out, he didn't think twice. He jumped back into action. The fall of Poland. Adrian was sent back to Poland as the head of the British military mission. His job was to help advise the Polish army and report back to Britain. But on September 1st, 1939, Nazi Germany launched a massive invasion of Poland. The Polish army fought bravely, but they were overwhelmed by the speed and power of the German attack. Adrian quickly realized that Poland could not win this battle. He advised the Polish leaders to retreat and regroup, but before they could act, things got even worse. On September 17th, the Soviet Union also invaded Poland from the east. The country was being crushed from both sides. As Warsaw fell into chaos, Adrian had no choice but to escape. He traveled through Romania, barely avoiding capture, and made his way back to Britain. The Norwegian Campaign 1940, Adrian was now back in Britain, but he wouldn't stay there for long. In April 1940, he was given command of British and French forces in an operation to recapture the Norwegian city of Trondheim from the Germans. However, the mission was doomed from the start. The troops were poorly equipped, and the Germans had full air superiority. Adrian and his men had no proper defenses against German bombers, and their supplies were running low. Even though Adrian led his troops with courage and determination, it was clear that the battle could not be won. In May 1940, he ordered a full retreat, and his men were evacuated. The mission had failed, but Adrian was praised for his calm leadership under fire. Captured by the Italians. In April 1941, Adrian was sent on another mission to Yugoslavia, where he was supposed to help the new government resist a German invasion. But things went horribly wrong. While flying over the Mediterranean Sea, his plane was shot down. He crashed into the water, lost consciousness, and nearly drowned. Somehow he managed to swim to shore, but as soon as he reached land, he was captured by Italian troops. He was now a prisoner of war. The Italians respected Adrian because of his military reputation. Instead of sending him to a normal prison camp, they placed him in Castello di Vincigliata, a medieval castle used as a special prison for high-ranking officers. But Adrian had no intention of staying locked up. Over the next 2 years, he made at least 5 escape attempts. He and his fellow prisoners dug a tunnel for 7 months, but it was discovered before they could escape. He disguised himself as an Italian peasant, but his eye patch and missing hand made him stand out, and he was quickly caught. He tried climbing the castle walls, but he fell and was recaptured. Even at 61 years old, Adrian refused to give up. In 1943, the war in Italy changed. The Italian government wanted to surrender to the Allies, and they needed someone to negotiate. Who did they choose? Adrian Carton de Wiart. The Italians freed him and sent him to Rome to help deliver secret messages to the Allies. From there, he was flown to Lisbon, Portugal, and then back to Britain. After 2 years as a prisoner, he was finally free, but his adventures weren't over yet. Diplomatic mission to China, 1943 to 1945. After his return to Britain, Winston Churchill personally chose him for a special mission, representing Britain in China. China was a key ally against Japan, and Churchill needed someone tough and experienced to work with Chiang Kai-shek, the leader of China. Even though Adrian had no diplomatic experience, Churchill knew that he was smart, fearless, and impossible to intimidate. Adrian traveled to China, met Chiang Kai-shek, and played a major role in British-Chinese relations. He spent the rest of the war advising the Chinese government and helping plan Allied strategy in Asia. By 1945, the war was finally coming to an end. Adrian had fought in 4 wars, survived countless injuries, and escaped from enemy hands multiple times. Most people would be ready to retire, but Adrian still had one last mission before stepping away from the battlefield for good. By 1945, World War II was over, and Adrian Carton de Wiart had done more than almost any soldier in history. He had fought in 4 wars, survived countless injuries, escaped from a prison camp, and even worked as a diplomat in China. Now, at 65 years old, it was finally time to retire. A painful goodbye to war. Even though Adrian had spent most of his life in battle, he knew he could not keep fighting forever. In 1947, he officially retired from the British Army with the rank of Lieutenant General. However, retirement did not mean an easy life. On his way home from China, he fell and broke his back in Burma. Once he recovered, he settled in Ireland, where he bought a house in County Cork. After years of war, travel, and danger, he finally had peace and quiet. Writing his memoirs. In 1950, Adrian published his autobiography, Happy Odyssey. In this book, he told the incredible story of his life, from his first battles in the Boer War to his time in a prison camp. The book was full of humor and adventure, showing that even after all the suffering he had been through, Adrian had no regrets. One of his most famous quotes from the book was, "Frankly, I had enjoyed the war." This simple sentence sums up who he was, a man who loved action, adventure, and the thrill of battle. Final years. In 1951, at the age of 71, Adrian remarried. His second wife, Joan McKechnie, was 23 years younger than him. They lived together in Ireland, where Adrian spent his time hunting, fishing, and enjoying nature, just as he had in Poland before World War II. On June 5, 1963, Adrian Carton de Wiart passed away at the age of 83. He was buried in a small cemetery in County Cork, leaving behind a legacy as one of history's toughest and most fearless soldiers. Adrian Carton de Wiart was more than just a soldier. He was a living legend. His life was filled with war, adventure, and near-death experiences. But through it all, he never gave up. A soldier covered in medals over his long military career, Adrian received some of the highest honors from multiple countries, including Victoria Cross, Britain's highest award for bravery in battle, Distinguished Service Order, DSO, for leadership under fire, Knight Commander of the Order of the British Empire, KBE, given for his service during World War II, Virtuti Militari, Poland, Poland's highest military honor, Belgian Croix de Guerre for his bravery in World War I. These medals prove what history already knows. Adrian Carton de Wiart was one of the toughest and most fearless soldiers ever. The real-life action hero, with his eye patch, missing hand, and countless war wounds, Adrian looked like a character from an action movie. Some believe he even inspired Brigadier Ben Ritchie Hook, a war hero in Evelyn Waugh's Sword of Honor trilogy. Adrian Carton de Wiart's life was something out of a movie, but it was all real. He fought in 4 wars, survived countless injuries, and never backed down. Whether leading troops into battle, escaping from a prison camp, or negotiating in China, he always showed unmatched courage. Even after losing an eye, a hand, and part of an ear, he kept fighting. His famous words, "Frankly, I had enjoyed the war," show the kind of man he was. He wasn't just a soldier, he was a warrior, a leader, and a legend. His story will never be forgotten.